Hello and welcome to topic 15. In this chapter, we're going to talk about analyzing patterns and the relationships that we find in them. We're going to begin with lesson 15-1. And this lesson is going to focus on numerical patterns, so patterns that you find in numbers. Let's go ahead and jump into our short video lesson, and then we'll do our notes and our guided practice.
How can you solve problems involving numerical patterns? Think about this question during the lesson. Lindsay has a sage plant that is 3 5/10 inches tall. She also has a rosemary plant that is 5 2/10 inches tall. Both plants grow 1 5/10 inches taller each week. How tall will the plants be after 5 weeks? What is the relationship between the heights of the plants? You can model with math by creating tables to help identify relationships between corresponding terms in the number sequences. How can tables help you solve? Tables make it easier to compare the heights of the plants after each week and to see relationships. How can you find the height of Lindsay's sage plant after 1 week?
Okay, so to find the height of the plant, we know that the rule that they gave us was to add 1 5/10 inches, which is 1.5 inches each week. So what you're going to do for both of these plants is you're going to take that starting height and you're going to add 1.5 to it to find the next week. And then once you find that total, you'll add 1.5 again to find the following week and so on.
Add 3 5/10 plus 1 5/10 equals 5. What is the height of Lindsay's sage plant after 2 weeks?
Select your answer.
So after 2 weeks, we're going to take that new height of 5 inches and we're going to add another 1.5 inches. So that's going to give us 6.5 inches or 6 5/10 inches.
Add 5 plus 1 5/10 equals 6 5/10. You can use the rule add 1 5/10 to complete the table for the sage plant. You can use the rule add 1 5/10 to complete the table for the rosemary plant. How much taller is the rosemary plant than the sage plant to start? How do you know? The rosemary plant is 1 7/10 inches taller than the sage plant to start, because 5 2/10 minus 3 5/10 equals 1 7/10. The rosemary plant is always 1 7/10 inches taller than the sage plant.
Now you know how you can solve problems involving numerical patterns.
Okay, before we get into our notes, you have to pay attention to something very specific about these two tables. Now, because both tables are moving the same exact amount, they're both adding 1 5/10 inches each week. That means the difference in the heights will not change. It will always be 1 7/10. So since they start out with a difference of 1 7/10, when you add the same amount to both of them, the difference will still be 1 7/10, no matter how many times you're adding that 1.5 inches. So as long as your numbers are moving in the same way by the same amount, your difference is going to remain the same as well. So our question that we're going to focus on for this lesson is how can you solve problems involving numerical patterns? So how do you solve a problem where you're looking at a pattern of numbers? How do you make sense of it? So remember, all of your patterns follow a rule. That means the numbers are going to change in the same way every time. When you know the rule, you can extend that pattern to see what comes next. So let's take a look at our first example. It says Emma has $100 in her savings account. Jorge has $50 in his savings account. They each put $10 in their accounts at the end of each week. Complete the tables to see how much each of them have saved after 5 weeks. So here, I know that the rule is plus 10. So whatever their starting number is, plus 10 each week. is going to give me their total week after week. So Emma is starting with $100 and Jorge is starting with $50. So we're going to start with Emma's table first. If she starts at $100, after 1 week, she'll have $110, then 120, 130, 140, and then by the 5th week, she'll have $150. For Jorge, he starts at $50, and we're going to follow the same rule, add $10 each week. So 50 becomes 60, and then 70, and then 80, and then 90, and then 100. So the difference between his ending amount and her ending amount is $50. The difference between the starting amounts is also $50. Because they're moving in the same way, we're adding 10 each time, the difference is not going to change. So if you look at week 1, for each of them, 100 minus 50 is 50 for their start. And then week 1 is 110 minus 60, which is also 50. For week 2, that's 120 minus 70, which is still 50, and so on all the way through your table. All right, let's look at another example. It says Jessica saved $50. She will add $25 to her account each week. Ron saved $40, and he'll add $25 to his account each week. How much will each have saved after 5 weeks? So we're going to set up our tables the exact same way. We're going to have their starting amount and then weeks 1 all the way to week 5 for each one of them. Now, each one of them is following the same rule, add 25, but they're starting with a different number in their savings account. So Jessica starts with 50 and Ron starts with 40. Now, let's work down Jessica's savings account. So after 1 week, the 50 plus 25 will give her 75, then 100, and 125, 150, and then 175 by the end of the 5th week. For Ron, we're going to start at $40 and we're going to add 25. So 40 plus 25 gave us 65, then 90, then 115, then 140, and then 165. So by the end of the 5th week, Jessica will have saved $175 and Ron will have saved $165. So by knowing what the rule is, we were able to extend this pattern out to 5 weeks. Now again, since our numbers are changing the exact same way, they're both following the same rule, the difference is always going to be the same. Jessica is always going to have $10 more than Ron. She started with 50 and he started with 40. That's a difference of 10. 75 minus 65 is a difference of 10. 100 minus 90 is a difference of 10. And that's going to apply no matter how far you extend that pattern. All right, our next question says Maria has $4 and she will save $10 each week. Stephen has $9 and he will save $10 each week. How much will they each have after 5 weeks? So same concept that we did in our previous examples. They start at a different amount. They both follow the same rule. So I know she starts with 4. So for her table, I start her with $4 and he starts with 9. So his table starts with $9. Now, you can do this a different way as well. And this is going to be something we're going to see in our later lessons. Now, I can make the table and fill it out and just keep adding our group of $10 each time. Or if I want to figure out how much they have after 5 weeks, and I know they're adding $10 to their account each one of those weeks. So this is 1 group of 10, 2 groups of 10, 3 groups of 10, 4 groups of 10, 5 groups of 10. I can show 5 groups of 10 as a multiplication of 10 times 5. And I can add whatever 10 times 5 is to the number that they started with. So for Maria's, I can have her $4 that she started with plus $10 for 5 weeks. So 10 times 5 will be 4 plus 50, which is going to give me $54 at the end of 5 weeks. I can do the same thing with Stephen's account. Stephen starts with $9 and then he saves $10 each week for 5 weeks. So I can do 9 plus those $10 times 5 weeks, which is the same thing as saying 9 plus 50, which is $59. Now here you can see that we have the same difference between the accounts again, a difference of $5 each time. If you were going to subtract Stephen's from Maria's, you can see that Stephen consistently has $5 more than her because he started with $5 more than her, and they're both moving week to week using the same amount, adding $10 each time. For your guided practice for this lesson, our first question says, Anthony says, the pattern is that the sage plant is always 1 7/10 inches shorter than the rosemary plant. Do you agree? Explain. So this goes back to the example that we did in our video lesson. Now here Anthony's correct. Since the start for the rosemary is 5 2/10 inches and the sage plant starts at 3 5/10 inches, the difference is going to be 1 7/10 inches. Now, because they were both following that same rule of adding 1 5/10 inches, the difference is going to stay the same no matter how far you follow that pattern. For number 2, how does making tables help you identify relationships between terms and patterns? By making a table, you can line up the numbers and compare them much more easily because you can put them side by side and you can figure out the difference between them and identify the pattern that you see. If the plants continue to grow 1 5/10 inches each week, how tall will each plant be after 10 weeks? So here we're going to apply that multiplication principle we were talking about. So we know the sage plant started at 3 5/10 inches. And we are going to add 1 5/10 inches for 10 weeks, or 1.5 times 10, which is going to give me that starting height of 3 5/10 plus 15, which is going to give me 18 5/10, or 18.5 inches. The rosemary plant started at 5 2/10 inches, and we're going to add 10 weeks worth of 1.5 inch growth. That's going to be 5.2 plus 15, and that's going to give us 20.2 inches. So the sage plant will be 18.5 inches, and the rosemary plant will be 20 2/10 inches by the end of 10 weeks. And number 4 says, if the plants continue to grow 1.5 inches each week, how tall will they be after 15 weeks? So again, apply that same principle, follow those same rules. 3.5 times the product of 1.5 inches times the 15 weeks will give us 3.5 plus 22.5, which gives us 26 inches for the sage plant after 15 weeks. For the rosemary plant, 5 2/10 inches plus 1.5 inches for 15 weeks, which gives us 5.2 plus the 22.5, which leaves us at 27 7/10 inches tall for the rosemary plant after 15 weeks. That takes us to the end of this lesson. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.